the Centre for Arts and Innovations slogan. We are here courtesy of Daniel Waswas and this marvellous facility that has been that's grown out of private funds and private enterprise. It has nothing to do with the University of Papua New Guinea, which is where Michael now is, because the art school there is practically defunct, anyway, as he will explain. But this is for the future. And he's just stepped out to ask the admin manager to hey, there you are.
That's right.
Hey, there you are. Michael. So anyway, I will do my introduction by starting to say, it's okay, I got it back. Yeah. Thanking Daniel Waswas and the excellent staff of the Centre for Arts and Innovation for their courtesy in lending their present. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Margaret, I'll still do the picture show. I had a long plan, so this one. Here it is. That's the Centre for Arts and Innovation.
Yes. I showed this.
Right. So that's it. And then hopefully, this should be the end of our speech, but we'll come to it in a bit. But this should be waiting for you in next year, the 50th anniversary of PNG's independence. So we're expecting OAS to be up here, share the time with us. But that's towards the end. But I'll let Susan continue, and I'll join up in a moment.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, it's very informal. We are we've only got together for a few days and running around saying hello to all the artists that we have been working with since the mid-1980s on promoting Papua New Guinea arts and writing our books and and working on exhibition projects and everything.
Just in relation to just to follow up on what Susan has mentioned, I've joined what was and is still the Creative Arts School at the University of Papua New Guinea. And of course, for many of us who would be familiar with the history of Papua New Guinea and the University of Papua New Guinea and the art school, of course, there was a great period of really Papua New Guinea just prior to independence, really calibrating a future for itself, and in particular through the arts, both in music, and who could forget institutions like Sanguma, for example, and the kind of music that they calibrated, using traditional cultural material together with chants and songs that belong to community, and then blending it with Western musical instruments, and developing a language that is very, very Papua New Guinean in a very broad sense. And it was a great period of time in terms of the art school and the theater, and then, of course, the production workshop, the textiles, the kinds of things that really brought Papua New Guinea together. And it was all prior to independence, but it was a very significant event because the arts really, in other ways, perhaps, but the arts in particular, and in the National Art School, the way it really came together, brought the country together in many ways. You had artists from Milne Bay in the Trobriand Islands, for example, and then going all the way up to Simbu, and then going all the way to East New Britain, and then going all the way around to Port Moresby. So, and they were in a melting pot of ideas, but really making a statement about who they were, but beginning to live with and recognize what each one was, and then what each one brought. And I think it was a very important part of Papua New Guinea in terms of creativity, in terms of bringing a nation together of 1,000 tribes, as has been called. We still 1,000 tribes, but some of those foundations were very significant. So the art school back then, and I happen to be now part of the National Art School, part of the University of Papua New Guinea, and I I don't mind saying this because I do recall some of those things that I've just mentioned. To what I've seen today is the shell of its former self.
Yes, it's very sad.
It's very,
it's decrepit. It's ready for demolition, and the equipment has been vandalized or disappeared. There is practically the roads are down. It's dirty. It's decrepit. There's nothing much for the students to start with. So the future starts now.
Yeah, and that future really is about reorganizing, rebuilding, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to say, but really look at what was there, but at the same time look at the things that are happening in and around us. And of course, the place where we're staying and speaking and sharing as part of this conference is really the place that Daniel was. And for some of us in our organization may well be familiar with Daniel and a lot of his endeavors in terms of creativity. He's, of course, from the Southern Highlands, and but trained here at the National Art School, and then later on developed and calibrated his skills and knowledge going over to New Zealand with an art school there, and then came back. And so a lot of his efforts and his vision is really this institution that we are now a part of, or we are now speaking on. And it's the Center for Arts and Innovation. And it's got some of the great artists who are here working and supporting
Gig
this
Mike
place.
Kundun,
Tom
Tom Deco, Larry Santana, Deveni,
yes,
and textile designer.
Yes,
So,
and then
and himself, of course. So they have been lecturers at UPNG and the University of Goroka as well. So these people have been dedicated to teaching art all their lives, as well as being incredible creative artists in each one with their own very distinctive style.
And one of the good things about this, and this is happening in places like Australia, in many other parts of the Pacific, I suppose, where, for example, when you look at the USP and the start of what used to be what is today part of the arts facility in the University of the South Pacific, that was begun by someone that also had a very significant footprint in the University of Papua New Guinea, Epeli Hawafa. And so in that sense, some of the places where we now need to universities becoming places of creativity, of inspiration, but most importantly, of gathering together artists as well as knowledgeable individuals in relation to our heritage and our history. And then we now need to bring that together to be the basis for what we want to do for the future. And I think that's very important for us in Papua New Guinea. So us working at the National Art School, despite the fact that it's really in a mess, but there is hope. And we continue to live with that hope in building something better. There are a couple of people that are fairly influential now in shaping that direction and that thinking. And
that would be, in particular, the National Cultural Commission led by Stephen Calandra. And Michael is on the board. You can say something about the amazing series of initiatives that he has launched since 2023.
He's gone to having, for example, art exhibitions annually in September for artists. He's also organized art competition nationally for up-and-coming artists, experienced artists, to really begin to develop their skills and really realize their visions in the format of an art exhibition. So he's been one of the great supporters. He's also developed a national cultural policy, and then from that cultural policy is now building provincial cultural policies, and then the provincial cultural centers. And so a couple of places in Papua New Guinea have taken that on. And one of the best examples is in Enga, the Enga Cultural Center, and how that has developed itself in promoting Enga culture, but also contemporary Engan culture in relation to some of our members may be familiar with the sand paintings of Enga. Yes. And so in that sense, they've been able to build on that. They've got a great museum, and Enga just happens to be a monolingual. In other words, the whole province is one language. So I suppose in some way it provides for an easier navigation. But culturally, the communities are very different in their own right. But bringing them together by having a museum where their history and heritage is now shared and now in a common place. And schools are now being encouraged to come to that place to learn about their past. So these are just small but very significant steps of provinces now taking a greater interest about their past, about their history and their heritage, and also guiding and navigating. Worst case scenario, of course, places like Port Moresby, many of us will be familiar with last year's efforts, and the beginning of the year, the turmoil and the challenges of development and the legacies of development, where there is a divide between those that may have it and those that may be on struggle street. The challenge is there. So in many ways, there are many challenges, but in amongst it all, the likes of Stephen Kilanda have done very well to develop these cultural policies to promote and to articulate cultural development as a significant aspect to places like Papua New Guinea. And so as a significant part of these, for our members, next year is, of course, the 50th anniversary of the independence in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah, so we've had some meetings and started to plan, so we hope that you already have your hands in your pockets to buy your tickets, because on this occasion in September next year, there will be a conference sponsored by the National Cultural Commission, a Papua New Guinea Arts, Past, Present and Future, which will invite equally keynote speakers internationally, but also Papua New Guineans 50-50. There will be a big festival. Of course, the independence celebrations will be something spectacular. And there will be an art exhibition at APEC House and a book launch of the book that Michael and I are currently doing. You might want to show a couple of slides, Margaret, called Living Art in Papua New Guinea. This is 50 years on from the first steps into the contemporary art movement to the present. But 50 years of developments in contemporary cultural expression. So we can't just say art. We have to say the indigenous visual languages, the way that they are developing and coming forward in their own right. So next one, thanks. The book has 3 sections. It does not define contemporary art as paintings and sculptures and works in Western media. It is what is made here and now by the people for themselves, as their own creative expression. So it's art now, and it can be ephemeral art like bilas, which is more important to many communities than any made objects. The themes are from custom to contemporary and the interanimation between custom and contemporary. Then the sites where art is made, village, urban, global, so that we have the creative spaces in each of these centres and the interstices between them. And then what is becoming more and more apparent as people look at the coding and the language that is embedded in the art and the art forms. So these themes are interlinked in the book. It will be published by Melbourne Books. David Tenenbaum is Wendy Chau was his wife until she tragically died of breast cancer a number of years ago. And their son, Aaron Chau is the musical director of the Melbourne Arts Orchestra. So he has a direct interest in Papua New Guinea himself, as well as being a good publisher. You can just run quickly through those sort of like headings. Because the other thing that David suggests, so the art event is going to be an international conference, the Arts of Papua New Guinea, Past, Present and Future, the launching of the book and a music festival. And, well, it's irresistible. Please come. The other thing is that David is considering doing a deluxe collector's edition of this book in, hardcover in a prestigious folder, including a print and signed by Michael and myself, a limited edition of 200 copies, and we might put forward that subscription. The money is going back to Papua New Guinea artists, so we, the book, they will all get a copy of the books. So we, we would appreciate support by the purchase of the book.
Indeed. And I think with this book and the highlighting not only of cultural performances and presentations, but also the inclusion now of not only the past in terms of art and artists, in the way that you can see Matthias Kawage, of course, and then of course there's generations now of his family that have continued the tradition, but more importantly, other artists that have come on, and there are significant works that are being developed, that are being collected by various individuals. Some of whom have been great supporters, of course. Our own art institutions, be that the National Museum and Art Gallery or any contemporary museum, the artists have really benefited from private collectors, really, in the way that they've really seen the growth and their imagination and the capacity in capturing even contemporary challenges and issues, and then weaving into that the history and the heritage. So from the image that you see there now on the slides to some of the images that have really come on, which will be in the book, really shows a progression, a development of the kind of ideas that have really begun to sieve through and come through. That picture of a divide, or the divided person, if you like, between history and heritage and rising towers and freeways and all the rest of it, of course, is that tension in being Papua New Guinean. And the hope is that we never throw away one, although it's quite easy to think it that way and the way the development comes through. But hopefully you can all come and support the work on the 50th anniversary in Port Moresby, and of course throughout the country. But as Susan has mentioned, there will be quite a number of events and activities, including the book launch.
And prior to that as well, we're planning an art auction, possibly towards the beginning of September, when everybody needs Christmas presents. This is organized by the artists themselves. They will contribute their artwork, and they will only take 30% of the auction price, and the rest of it will go towards developing this creative arts program that is going to be a joint effort between the University of Papua New Guinea and the Centre for Arts and Innovation. And this is, they have a lovely art gallery here too. Well worth visiting.
Yeah, this picture is not really clearly demonstrated, but it's just a small sample of the gallery. It's just some major efforts that are being made by individuals, but it's really building and developing the cultural space in Papua New Guinea. And finally, we just want to say thank you to OAS for bringing us and taking us this, giving us this opportunity to pitch the book, but also
pitch the festival,
pitch the festival and do all of the things. But we just want to say thank
exhibition
you.
And the art auction,
yep.
And all for good cause, so that
Absolutely.
the artists can benefit by getting better facilities.
And we look forward to seeing all of you up here come next September. So it'll be a great party. So we'd love to see, if not all of you, some of you up this way when everything is happening for the 50th.
Yeah, look at you now.
Yeah, look at you, Blanomo. Right? Thank you so much, Margaret, and for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Michael and Susan. Now, if you just stay there while we get Deveni sorted, we'll share his slides with you as well. We're very fortunate today to have Deveni Temu in the room, who is a research assistant with the Pacific Manuscripts Bureau down at the ANU. And he's going to share some really wonderful images today of a rather unknown collection that actually sits at the moment in the University of Papua New Guinea, the Hugh Stevenson collection. And then after that, we'll have some question and answer with both Deveni and also Michael and Susan.
Margaret, the first touring exhibition, Hugh Stevenson and myself curated this exhibition that travelled Australia and New Zealand in the year between 1989 and 89, 90, 93. So it was a look again, contemporary art from Papua New Guinea. And it was Hugh's initiative, and he was my mentor at the time. And he founded the expressive arts curriculum for PNG schools.
Thank you. So we'll just, I'll just try and set up the slides for Deveni. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Margaret. Good to see Susan and Michael over there.
Hey, Deveni, look at you.
In 2008, I joined a group of artists, and includes Susan, Michael, Jocelyn Lay, and Daniel Waswas. And we met with Andrew Sayers, who was the National Museum director then, and made a proposal of this Live in Art project. And unfortunately, it didn't get any backing, but I was very fortunate. I was the only librarian in the team. I had no artistic experience, but I knew a lot about contemporary artists who were working at the time at UPNG when I was a student. So in 2008, when the project was rejected, I was really fortunate that Matthew Trinker, who was the director of the National Museum, who took over then, was very supportive to develop these internship programs with Papua New Guinean artists, especially museum workers or curators. And so in this process, Hugh Stevenson came to my attention. And at the time, I was working at the Pacific Collections Librarian at ANU. And when I then discovered this, Susan, Jocelyn, and I went to UPNG at about 2018 and 2008, and we went and saw this Hugh Stevenson collection that was still unpacked. So we came back and then we made a pitch to the director of the National Museum, Matthew Trinker at the time. And of course he jumped to it because he wanted Australia to be seen, helping and supporting Papua New Guinea. So I was very fortunate that I was able to collaborate and coordinate the visits of the senior curators from the National Museum. And we were able to go and, in many ways, rescue this unknown or unheard of Hugh Stevenson collection. So you may ask, who was Hugh Stevenson? Hugh Stevenson went to Papua New Guinea in about 1969, 70. And like a lot of young Australians who went up to Papua New Guinea, he became a primary teacher. He taught in primary schools around Port Moresby. And then through that, he worked his way up and became quite senior in the education department of PNG, and then became the coordinator of the newsletters of the schools. And he was working with a lot of graphic artists in that job. And through that, and by this time, the couple that some of you in this room would have heard of, Georgina Baya and Uli Baya, they were at UPNG, and I was at UPNG as an undergrad student. And so this is when a lot of the names that Susan has already flagged, Matthias Kawage, Timothy Akis, yeah, Ruki Fame, not Ruki Fame, Ruki Fame, yeah, Gik Mai, all those names. Yeah. So, as I was saying, this then, well, the National Museum came to our rescue and we were able to get the team over there. So we made 3 visits to this collection. So Hugh Stevenson, who was here, as I said, there's a woman there, and then he's the next one. Sorry, from my...
Keith Stubbs.
Yeah, the one in glasses.
In education.
The one in glasses. He was born in Setnock. Some of you have got that bio already in the abstract that up. And so I knew him as a staff of the education department personally, but not, just as an acquaintance. And I had no idea that he was involved in collecting this amazing collection. Yeah, sorry? Yeah, that's Hugh Stevenson. Yeah. And his mother, this photo was taken. And Hugh Stevenson, when he left in late 1988, he gave his first batch of collection to the University of Papua New Guinea. And it was in 1984. And at the time, the Vice Chancellor was Elton Brash. And it was it was on permanent loan. And so the collection was more or less left in boxes in the basement of the Michael Somare Library at UPNG on campus, and nobody knew what to do with it. And so when this project that Susan Cochrane initiated and the National Museum found funding for us to go, I led a team of senior curators in 2011. And this was the whole idea, was to conserve and document this amazing collection. Yeah, Georgina Baya and Uli Baya, who played this amazing role in discovering all these contemporary artists. And this is a photo of us arriving at UPNG Library to start this amazing work of repacking, reassessing, all those things. And this is how we found the collection. And the lady in red hair is Benita Tunks, who was a team leader of the National Museum, and Kathy Collins, who was also a senior curator for the... So in here, as you can see, they're explaining to the staff that you wear gloves, you don't go rush in with all your hands and grab these things. People had no idea what to do with them. So this was a really steep learning curve for a lot of them. And here's Benita again, demonstrating how to untie and repack. And these are prints which were badly stored in filing cabinets. And, unfortunately, there were people who were coming in and out, and obviously some went missing. It happens. But this particular room where the packages were stored used to be the old dark room for developing films. So when we arrived in 2011, it was still, the films were still there, and we got experts to come in, extract and defilm it. And then, it was then assessed by the curators that it was safe to unpack and move things and store. Now, this is Tupla Kumul. Susan will relate to this one. It's in her book, Contemporary Arts of PNG. So just to illustrate, we then arrived at UPNG, and the directive came from the Vice Chancellor then, Professor Ross Hines, to all the staff that we were visiting from Australia, and we were going to staff rooms, staff lounges, and private homes on campus to retrieve any of the paintings that were on loan. So we did. And this was on loan to the physics department. And so the morning we were walking around, we had just arrived, and the cleaning lady was there with a mop. And then we walked in, and there she was about to brush past this painting. This painting unfortunately fell. I'm not sure whether it fell or it came down, and she had it leaning against the wall on the floor. And she was just about to brush past the painting with the mop. So that's when we took it back, took pictures, and went and demonstrated to the Vice Chancellor and the staff. This is what happens if you don't care for these paintings. And this is how some of them were stored. And this is from the Vice Chancellor's residence. We were allowed to go in there, and
Light affected
more from the
frames.
Vice Chancellor's residence. And this is Arkis, one of the most well-known, Arkis and Kawage, they are at par in my thinking.
Yes, don't forget to ask about the Arcus Art Prize later.
Yes. So again, these prints, they were just so badly stored, but we were really lucky with the funding. We were able to get storage facilities, archival, proper storage boxes to rebox and arrange this in this room, which was cleared. Now, and then it wasn't just paintings, it was also artifacts as well. So this is when we arrived. These were on the floor. We had to take it up. And of course, there's the asthmat shield at the back there, wedged between a cardboard box to protect it. Yeah, and these amazing works, they were in the basement. Now they're stored. And these were on the floor when we arrived. We had to lift them up and put them up so they hang properly. And this is the dark room that was converted to hold these. And this is how we found them, and we then rearranged them to make sure that they're properly stored. Again, the National Museum, Nikki Smith, Senior Curator of the National Museum, with Benita there. And Raymond Ray, unfortunately, the tragedy of this project is that this young man was appointed to be the head of the Hugh Stevenson collection. And he died of cancer in 2014, after we had brought him down to Canberra and trained him, and he went back and died of cancer. And in this picture, there's a lady in the purple pink Mary blouse. That's Caro. Caro is now the New Guinea collection, current New Guinea collection librarian. And it won't sit, but she replaced Josefa Kappa, who was the New Guinea collection librarian, whom this Hugh Stevenson collection was to be looked after. But again, Josefa Kappa died soon after Raymond. So it's a big tragedy. And this is Josefa Kappa with her back here, and Raymond there. Both of them, they were our hope to look after this collection. And unfortunately, they both passed on. So Karen Caro, I contacted her 3 weeks ago. She said, Deveni, nobody's working on it. It's just sitting there. Nothing is happening. Real sad. And this is when we went the loading bearing of the space we were going to put this collection. So there's a engineer here in his glasses here and the vice chancellor at the back there. So it was all okayed and we were able to unpack and move everything into this special room. That was the former dark room. And again, this is some of the prints of that amazing collection. Now, so I come on to Hugh Stevenson collection, a total of 350 paintings, 60 sculptures, and 3,000 images of color transparencies. And Hugh also not just gave the paintings and all these artworks, but he backed it up by giving his personal library of over 3,000 books to support anybody who was going to carry research out on this collection. And that was all unpacked and stored as well within that room. So they're all there locked up. Nothing is happening to them. And I talked of Georgina Baya and Uli. So this is Marie Taita. Marie was a rural woman. She was the only artist at the time when Akes and Kawage were discovered. And she specialized on fabric. And Georgina Baya worked closely with her. Now, again, I just want to point out a story of her that according to Uli Baya, in his book, Decolonizing the Mind, says Marie Taita, he was becoming too successful because she was, her prints were really selling like hotcakes. And then in her society, in her belief system, you don't become too successful, otherwise they will work magic on you and you die. So according to, well, it's written anyway, that Uli and Georgina went with her to her village. And unfortunately, they were driving through to get the plane back to Port Moresby. And it's a coconut plantation. A coconut fell, of course, aimed her and fell on her head. Didn't kill her, but she believed that was magic. Worked, I was making too much money. And my tribesmen, my kinsmen have got jealous, and this is what happens. And she gave up her amazing work. And this is one that was, sorry? Oh, that's, yes, Sebastian. Yeah, that's right. And this is Marie's, based on her ancestral tattoo patterns. And we come to Mary Gole. Some of you heard of her. She had that amazing exhibition out at Queensland, Susu Mama, yeah, when feeding babies was to be marketed for PNG women. I mean, they feed their children anyway. There's no milk. But anyway, she's famous for her work. And this photo was taken by Hugh Stevenson and Agatha, her colleague, beside her. And Mary has her studio in Hohola, suburb of Port Moresby, Hohola. And this is one of her works. And this was strongly influenced by Margaret Cassidy and Patricia May, that amazing contemporary pottery of Papua New Guinea book. Yeah, so Mary says she acknowledges them, and because she didn't want to continue in her Oro province style of pottery, she wanted to make it modern. And Susan mentioned Wendy Cholai. Wendy died in 2011. I've got a whole story of people who haven't made it, and it's very sad. And she, a Papuan and Amazon woman who questioned, moved out of the circle to have her artwork. And sometimes she said in her book, white people used to look at it and say, oh, I'm no Papua New Guinea. That's not PNG, that's not PNG style. And she said, whatever, and moved on. And in here, it's her grass skirt made of plastic. and mixing it. And of course, her own people also questioned her, why are you desecrating our traditional dancing costume? But she was an artist. And that's another one. And this is one of her works. Yeah. So Hugh Stevenson and all these artists, some of these amazing collections that are sitting there, as I said, 360 paintings, 60 sculptures, and the amazing library collection. Nobody can access it. So a lot of unanswered questions from me who worked closely with this collection. And of course, I feel personally sad that we wasted all this money, energy in bringing people to be trained only to find that they haven't lived on to look after this collection. So, and then Hugh Stevenson's last wish was to find an Australian academic institution to link up. And through that link, I mean, we talked about electronic sharing. These days, Papua New Guinea and Pacific Islanders are online digitally. I can communicate with my brothers and sisters in my village, sitting on their veranda, paddling past, and we can talk. And that's how it is, this power of digitization, electronic connection, communication. So Hugh's idea of bringing this collection, sitting there at the Michael Mel Library in this dark room, needs to come out. And so we want to partner with the Australian academic institution. We've worked hard with ANU, but unfortunately the vice chancellors changed, and I retired from ANU from full-time work in 2017. So I don't have any authority or anything to convince anybody. But you know, you are the experts, so some of you might want to chew on this and may have suggestions on how we can get this collection to be out, like you're saying. You know, we have to bring it out to the people. And finally, this is a collection that was discovered, remember self-government independence, 72, 75. Whitlam was saying he's under pressure from the UN, get them to be independent, don't delay. And everything was rushed, and we were untrained. We were pushed into accepting jobs that we didn't get any training for and made a mess of things. And we don't want that to be repeated. 50th anniversary is coming up. We want to do it properly this time round so we can get things into place and not always complain, well, you know, yeah, not a basket case. We don't want to be a basket. Papua New Guinea doesn't want to be a basket case. We've developed these strong links with Australia. It's only 5 kilometers from, you know, Badu Island to the coast of Daru. So strong. And Lizard Island, you know, they discovered pottery recently, connect strongly to the Motu people, the pottery. So the connection is still there. And so I want to end by what my mother used to say. When my mother came to Australia, she said, I'm going to Vanua Walana. They never say Australia. Vanua is village, Walana is the root. Australia is the root of our villages. So that's where she came to. And that link is very strong. We have to maintain that strong link, of course, colonial. And unfortunately, a lot of young Australians have no idea that Papua New Guinea was a colony of Australia. So, yeah, Hugh Stevenson, he collected these amazing 360 paintings, sculptures, and with documents to support this amazing collection. So 50th anniversary is coming up. So challenge to the society members is to see how we can work together to bring this to light. It's just sitting there in darkness, really, literally, in this dark room. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Deveni. What I'll just do is I'll bring Michael and Susan back up on the big screen, and then we'll have a question and answer session with all three panel members, and the audience will have an opportunity to ask questions as well. So I think to start off with, just before we get questions from the audience, I think what we're seeing is different lenses of much the same question, really, about the very rich, thank you, the very rich visual history and cultural history of the, Michael, 1,000 tribes of Papua New Guinea. And so I think one of the first questions really to ask you, Michael, you're really in the middle of it at the moment. You've been working here in Australia for a number of years. You've gone back to Papua New Guinea. How are you finding the preparations and the transition towards the 50th anniversary of independence?
Thank you, Margaret. And also thank you to Deveni for that presentation, to complement what Susan and I presented in providing the contemporary arts and their development. The challenges are many in Papua New Guinea. In terms of our interests, particularly on the cultural landscape, there is in the provinces, of the 22 or so provinces, there is great interest, there's great recognition of our cultural selves. So particularly on, say, Independence Day or great festivities and events that have happened, the cultural celebrations are coming more and more to the fore. And the provincial governments, as well as the national, but more the provincial governments, there is a recognition of culture and in the way that people are taking it on as a part of their communities. Of course, having said that, the types of costume, the way in which bilas, for want of a better way of putting it, that have come on have changed, obviously. And particularly with the influx of new and different and very, very colorful and tactile material, there are provisions for a lot of changes and rearrangements. But overall, the interest is there. On the other side of it, in terms of the state at a national level and also at the provincial level, the actual support for example, for a department, be it in the province or at the national level. You look at the National Cultural Commission, the Tourism Authority, and then you look at the Institute of PNG Studies. These institutions are very, very significant. And if you take what Deveni has presented in talking about the Hugh Stevenson collection sitting in the library and in the way that it's been catered for and cared for, thankfully, by certain people in the library to this day. But the support and the funding of cultural institutions and the kind of activities that they need to engage with, the funding is lackluster. There is a lot of money that has been spent on other economic areas, and cultures quite often tend to get minuscule amounts. Of course, Stephen Kilanda, the head of NCC, has fought a strong fight basically to provide evidence to the government saying that I should not be in the social sector, which is one dimension of the funding of government. I should be part of the other, more lucrative in the sense that we generate a greater portion of the nation's wealth through culture. So therefore, cultural activities should be funded under an economic sector approach rather than by the social sector, because we continue to, despite what we do for the country and bring in terms of finance and in terms of the wealth that's being generated, we get minuscule amounts each year anyway. So that's the kind of dilemma and the challenges that we're facing. And so the great interest outside in coming in, looking at the multicultural dimensions of Papua New Guinea, there is great interest. But locally, the challenges are definitely, one of which is the funding aspects of it. In the communities and in the provinces, the interest is there to continue and to build, to resurrect, and to really retain as much as possible what is ours. And that you can see by the different festivals across the country, from up in West Sea Peak, going all the way to New Ireland, going all the way down to Hirian and Namu, and all the way to the Gulf and into Milne Bay. You can see, and then going all the way to Hela, coming all the way to Enga, and the Enga festival is just it's on now. So in that sense, there is a lot of interest, there is a lot of support, but you need to also have departments that actually manage and organize these things properly and for the long term. And of course, in the institutions, I work now in the National Papua New Guinea University, National University, but the funding, I must say, has been very, very pitiful. And one reason for that is really the rundown, the state of the facilities and the equipment, and then the lackluster, the small band of staff who are there but who could do next to nothing with very little money. And so in that sense, there are some very big challenges. At the same time, communities have been resilient. And under difficult and challenging circumstances, culture has become a very significant aspect of a sense of self-worth and of belonging to somewhere in some place. So there's all these challenges. Let me stop here.
Thanks, Michael. We might take questions from the audience. Marina, you've got a question. Jude's got a microphone, so everyone can hear.
Mine's really a two-part practical question, Deveni. I was fascinated to hear, I don't think this thing's on, but I've got a loud voice. First of all, who actually owns that collection, the Stevenson collection?
Well, as I said, Hugh, it was on permanent loan in 1984. It's now owned by the University of Papua New Guinea.
It seems to me, certainly those of us who survived 1988, there was money around to do things. Now, and presumably the Australian government is prepared to kick some money in. I haven't heard about that. I'm a bit hard to combine these things these days. But surely there's a possibility of getting some sort of grant to at least do more things with the collection. I mean, I don't know what order of magnitude its funds is needed. You would have a better idea of that. But it just seems to me almost criminal that it's just sitting there. I mean, I hope the blooming thing's air conditioned. But, you know, in conjunction with this 50th anniversary, are there possibilities perhaps of doing something in that regard?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's criminal that it's just sitting there in that dark room. I am based in Canberra, so I've contacted the new director of the National Museum, and apparently they've got their programs all worked out years in advance. So nothing can be done this time. Yeah, well, exactly. So yeah, so our thinking has to be so. Welcome any suggestions that people have.
Deveni, you know, as we know from our early years of 2008, it was part of the program that the National Museum of Australia and the National Gallery of Australia has done likewise. You saw Benita Tunks leading the group and training, interns to help Papua New Guinea to help themselves. That is the essential thing. The National the National Museum of Australia had sent a team to assist with the conservation of the collection and to teach conservation methods and proper storage. Then, you know, once those interns and those traineeships have taken place, they will then exist within the country, not just somebody coming in on a grant and doing a bit of work and then going again. The same, the National Gallery of Australia assisted the National Museum with the PNG National Museum with its refurbishment, and they took some trainees and internships. They also repatriated 200 valuable objects from the National Gallery collection to Papua New Guinea, and this has been organised by Crispin Howarth. But the projects that can train Papua New Guineans to new skill sets where they can safeguard their cultural heritage and where they can be effective arts administrators, these positions, they are not currently fulfilled. And so, I mean, I have some kind of skill sets I would like to, I pass on when I can. But I'm a bit old now and need some younger people to take it on.
So, Michael, I guess the question is that this isn't in the curriculum. These sorts of courses aren't running at the University of Papua New Guinea at the moment. Yeah, conservation correct. And museum studies and so forth.
That is correct. But that said, we're not completely away from it. There are some efforts being made, but if we can get support from elsewhere, as has been suggested, to complement some of the local efforts. But just for example, one is of course Daniel's facility. That's a fairly innovative way. That's a very significant step in private, an individual who's an artist himself, but who has had to go in and fund this on his own, and then to really build this so that he's working towards developing a facility for not only artists, but also for training and up-and-coming persons. It is my hope that to have a bit of conversation with Daniel to see how the university can link up with the Center for Arts and Innovation to really collaborate and develop things together. And for a private investor to do these kinds of things, kudos to Daniel and his efforts of training. And in the process, we may not only train artists, but also technical people who can care for art and art material and so forth. So I'm hoping that that'll be one. And then the other area that's my former institution at the University of Baroka, we supported the introduction of museum studies in relation to indigenous and museum studies. And that has got the only diploma, and then a diploma that gradually will become a degree. So that in the process of education, we may be able to develop people who may be able to develop some of the skills and the knowledge that are very necessary for the aspects that you've spoken about. So there are steps being taken, but definitely there will need to be support. So some of the indications in the conversation so far of external support with some of the efforts that are being made here, and they are quite brave efforts, and I think should be supported in the way that we want to move. And so there are opportunities being created. Margaret, thank you.
Do we have some more questions here in the room? Oh, Deveni wants.
I just want to say one thing. Actually, there was pictures taken of all the paintings and artifacts and sculptures online, but we took it to the ANU drill hall to look at it, and unfortunately the resolution used by the UPNG cameraman didn't meet the requirements for it to go online, but there is a copy of the full listing of the holdings of the Hugh Stevenson collection. So again, if that's a resource, if that can be supported by anybody to revamp it and make it available, that would be fantastic.
This is a question for Michael. You suggested that the arts portfolio or arts funding should come from an economic sector of the government, and that arts add value to the economically to the country. How do you explain that it adds economic value?
The economic value is particularly in the way that, just one example of the economic value in relation to the influx of tourism, of tourists and visitors coming into the country. And when you look at the amounts of kina, if you like, that are being spent in various areas, whether it be going to the craft market or going to hotels and staying in hotels and spending money, and I mean, the wealth that's being generated by that kind of where culture is the ticket of people coming to the famous Goroku show or the Hagen show for that matter. They came in droves for the fact that they came, had to pay their plane fares, they had to then pay for the hotels. All of those things generates a certain amount of money that's really built on culture. And therefore, it would be well worth taking that data to provide justification why funding should be much, much better when an industry like culture does bring in an income, that we provide the social aspects of it, but at the same time, we also provide the benefits in relation to the economic benefit. There is an economy that is very much driven by culture. And I don't think that's Papua New Guinea alone. When you look at all the history and all the facilities that are in Europe and elsewhere, culture is a very significant aspect to anyone's economy. That's why people are so keen in museums and cultural facilities and historical buildings and so forth and so on, because it is definitely an economy. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
We've got another question.
I would like to mention the Arcus Art Prize.
Yeah.
This is something that is happening right now. It is the initiative of one of the women dynamos here in Papua New Guinea. When women get behind a project, you have never seen such, energy and determination to see it succeed. Lani Ovita is the driving force behind the Arcus Art Prize. She has organised for the first time that this will be, people will submit their entry online. Let's go again, this is the problem. So, because the postal system is weak, can you imagine that people can't just go to their local post office and buy a tube and some tissue paper to wrap their painting in and pop it in a tube and send it into the museum for the Arcus Art Prize. So for the first iteration, that's just coming up now, it's online. There is also a division for children, so youth art. And she has arranged a generous sponsorship by individual philanthropists and companies to support the Arcus Art Prize. And if this gets re-established, then it will, you see, one thing can push another. You can say, yes, this generated so many, like 1,000 entries. However, the problem was for people to get their artworks to one central location, you need to have a post office system that functions where everybody can go and leave their packed artworks, or you need to have TNT or one of the rare, in a provincial centre where people can drop off their artwork. So it's the links that have to be made between the idea and the actuality. Yeah. And so that is so often with the facility being poor, badly maintained, or the staff not having sufficient training to properly deal with the material that is valuable, like the Stevenson collection. So And you can't, but still, despite that, you can't say let's just do nothing, because you need like people like Michael and Daniel and Lani and everyone to put their energies behind the wheels and drive them forward. So this is quite, it's always amazing every time I come back. And I think that Australia could do a lot more to support education and training in the arts sector, and a bit more generous funding, because, the art funding for First Nations, Australian First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders has been generous for years. However, Australia has a very, very paltry record of funding anything for any of its Melanesian neighbours in the cultural sector.
Thanks, Susan. We got any more questions?
Oh, the dates for you to come to Papua New Guinea next year. And you must book early, because there's only a finite number of hotels. And of course, is the 15th of September will be the national 50th anniversary. And so and there will be festival events, and that we'll let that pass. And then a couple of days later, we will have the 2-day national conference, art exhibition, and book launch. So there you go. That's the dates.
We've got another question now. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ronnie. I was Papuan musician, and I'm glad to hear from Brother Michael when you mentioned about the arts and the performing and festival, and knowing that just recently with the Pacific Festival of Arts that took place in Hawaii, and to see that celebration of diversity of the Pacific arts and culture, and PNG hosted the 2015 Pacific Games, and NITV did show the opening ceremony, and the world also have a view of that opening ceremony of the beautiful cultural attires. And one thing that I want to just also ground this is that I think the conclusion from our keynote speaker about finding the community of artists, the practitioners within those spaces is essence, because that is where they are the frontline actors, you would like, or people that could see beyond the institutional bureaucracy, but they're the ones that actually perform. And so, Brother Irie Leke Ingram, that we've been engaged in reframing, in collaboration, particularly within the music, where it's of essence. And I understand with 50 years celebration of Papua New Guinea, it's of essence as well to know those that performing artists through Sanguma Band, through the likes of the Black Brothers from West Papua, where they pretty much revolutionized the music in itself in PNG with the Chinech Min studio, and all the way across to Vanuatu, Solomons. Many in the 80s would still remember the songs, the music. And so it's also of importance to make sure that grants or commission work, funding, the practitioners have to be also in those spaces to give their views or thoughts and discussion, because that is where we'll see when we look at the social aspect, we look at the economic aspect, they bring that. And from indigenous to indigenous connection, Australia has a lot to offer through the indigenous connection. And we talk about arts and culture. That's something that is yet to be tapped into. And I hope that with the 50 years celebration coming up, through the DFAT initiatives in looking, but also arts institutions here in Australia and in PNG, to really look at tapping into the arts community here in Australia, but also in PNG, and really engage the artists, the performers, to be able to really drive conversation. How do they want to see a festival look like? And in the case of the Enga Festival, Sister Tanya Nugent, who lives here in Australia, worked with the ABC and was or is still the key person in curating that festival in Enga. And that's an example and a testament to the Enga Festival today that we sing, bringing a lot of people to come and see that amazing showcase of the culture there. So just want to also add on that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well, you
Ronnie.
can all be jealous because I'm on my way to the Crocodile and Arts Festival in Ambunti on the East Sepik this weekend.
Great.
So, bye.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Michael and Susan and Deveni. It's been a great session, and we've just got lunch arriving, so we might say goodbye for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice, nice. Yeah.